Everybody, it's a happy Monday. It's a joyful Monday here on Crossing Broadcast. I had coffee this morning. It's been a long time since I've had coffee before the show. And I went, you know what? I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to drink some coffee, and I'm going to bring a little bit of energy because we could use some energy around here. Could use a little bit of energy here at Crossing Broad on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, and if I can finagle it here in the next 20 or 30 seconds, I'll get this thing flowing up on Instagram Live as well. But I want to thank everybody for joining today because I think that today is going to be a good show. There's a lot to get into, and if you noticed, I don't know how many of you actually look, but I'm going to go to the comments a lot on today's show. I don't know how many of you typically take a gander at what the rundown of the show is, but we're going to get to 4 of the teams. Sorry to the Union. I might even touch on, and this is actually going to be offensive to Union fans everywhere, I might even talk very briefly about what happened with the Philadelphia Soul, because if you haven't seen, that was over on crossingbroad.com today. The Philadelphia Soul's season has been canceled before it ever got started. So we're going to have to get into that at some point as well. Maybe, we'll see. Phillies, Zach Wheeler, not the best effort yesterday, but we're going to talk about the Phillies who enter today leading the majors in wins. Is it fool's gold? Is it real? Is it a weak schedule? Are they overusing some of their vets? Are we going to potentially have some injury issues? We'll talk about that. I do want to have a little conversation about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. I turned on Sports Talk Radio this morning, and I was like, oh, they must be talking about the Phillies because the Phillies are kind of a big deal. And again, they lead the majors in wins, and it was a question about Jalen Hurts and about whether or not he's going to be able to take a step forward this year. So we will talk about Jalen Hurts because I actually have a little bit of Eagles juice this morning as well. The Sixers, I want to talk about whether or not, based on what you've seen, what I've seen, could the Sixers have taken it to the Pacers? And I saw that my coworker, guy on our team, Danny Small, the great, from up at Elite Sports New York, he's here. I would love to kind of pick Danny's brain at some point as well about the Knicks and about the fact that they've now fallen back down to earth. The Pacers have tied up that series. The Nuggets also tied up their series against the Timberwolves. Everybody was ready to anoint Anthony Edwards as the second coming of Michael Jordan. We'll talk about the playoffs, but could the Sixers have competed with the Pacers? Would the Sixers have lined up better against the Pacers? Yes, we are going to live and die a little bit today with a little bit of revisionist history. We'll talk about the hypotheticals. And, the Flyers. If you're a Flyers fan, I'm wearing the Snow The Goalie shirt today. We haven't done a new episode in a few weeks, and I've had some people who have been saying on Twitter, hey, you guys realize that you can do an episode. It doesn't just have to be about the Flyers. Why don't you talk about the playoffs? About the NHL playoffs. You know, there are teams that are actively playing and competing for Lord Stanley's Cup. We'll talk about that as well. Bunny has an event coming up next month. I think he has something else coming up this week. We've been trying to sync up those schedules. I got back from a work conference last week. Maybe we'll talk about that for a second, but we'll live our best lives there. And I think that's it. Craig, was there anything else? Oh, yeah, the Flyers stuff. Matvei Michkov, there's this rumor going around that perhaps, the Flyers are talking to his team in the KHL. Could they potentially be trying to negotiate an early release of Matvei Michkov? So we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. But like I said, I'm very excited to kind of get into all of this with all of you today because, listen, there are weeks. I'm going to admit something. I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. There are some weeks where I get to a Monday and I say, is there something I can bring energy to? And there have been a few weeks, and I've gone back and listened because that's just part of being critical of oneself is sometimes you go back and you listen to yourself and you listen to the show and you check the comments and you say, did I hit all the things that I wanted to? Were we interactive enough in the chat? Admittedly, that is Craig's domain. On the other side of the glass, making $470,000. He got a pay cut in the last week, down from $750. He's back down to $475. He has to do a little bit better job on the ones and twos with the comments. But I listened back and I was like, there have been a few episodes here where the energy has been low. And if there's one thing that you should be able to expect every time we chat, it's that there's a little bit of energy. Is it the coffee talking? Maybe. Can I tell you really quick what the coffee drink was today? So it was a Shakerado. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of a Shakerado, but I'm just going to tell you. So I'm watching Ina Garten yesterday. It was Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers who listen and watch the show. And I'm watching this Ina Garten show. My wife and I, we love the Barefoot Contessa, but she doesn't do that show anymore. She has this I forget what it's called, but it's something with friends or whatever. And she brings on a celebrity and they talk. And I forget the guy's name, but he was instrumental in the creation of Shake Shack or something. And so he He was talking about this shakerado, and Ina Garten made it. So I'm going to give you a recipe right now. And my hand is steady, but I will tell you that my mind and my heart are racing a little bit today. You have to make espresso. Love espresso. All right, so it's like 3/4 cup of espresso. You pour it over ice. You get your cocktail shaker out. Get the cocktail shaker out. Let it get to room temp. 3/4 of a cup. I did a cup of espresso. You do 2 tablespoons of sweetened condensed milk, 1 tablespoon of simple syrup, a little splash of vanilla. Shake that sucker up. Put it in a low glass. I think Craig already pulled it up. I love Craig. I love when Craig is on it. It's the Ina Garten one, though. It's the vanilla shakerado, so you better get it right, Craig. If you didn't pull up the right recipe, we're not giving anybody else credit. It's all Ina Garten. And Danny, I love Danny. Cooking for Jeffrey, 100%. Jeffrey's her husband. They don't have kids. They have each other, and they have the Hamptons, and they have a whole bunch of friends. But anyway, that drink was fantastic. My wife said it was like a Vietnamese coffee, but I will tell you, great stuff. So there it is. There's the recipe on the screen if you're watching live on YouTube, on Instagram Live, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever you're joining the show today. There's your recipe on the screen for the shakerado. I cannot endorse it enough. It is fantastic. Will I be making it again tomorrow? I have no idea. I feel like it might be a really bad life decision if I did this every day. But the amount of caffeine coursing through my veins is going to carry us through the show today. And I think I might even have somebody hop on here for a second to talk about the Sixers and about the Knicks and about the Pacers, again, from our XL Media family. So we'll get there in a little bit. Let's talk about the Phillies really quickly, because there have been some concerns that I guess have surfaced over the weekend. And when you look at the Phillies, and I would encourage everyone, I know that I do these plugs a lot for the other shows on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network, but if you're looking for a deep dive into the numbers, Bob and Ant did a new episode of Crossed Up. It's in the podcast feed now. It's also on the Crossing Broad channel. You can pause this and go listen to that and come back. You can earmark it or bookmark it or whatever for yourself for later. But they did a bigger breakdown in it. The one thing that I have a little bit of a concern about is just the number of guys that we know are on the wrong side of 30. Are they maybe playing a little bit too much? And going into the season, the guy that I was most concerned about was JT Realmuto, because when you look at it, catchers, when they get to a certain age, you kind of have to start doing not really load management, but maybe you don't want to play them in as many games. You don't want the body to break down. Realmuto's best attribute, what he can bring you, he is most valuable to you as a catcher, not as a first baseman, not as a DH. What he can give you from the catcher position is huge. And I saw over the weekend that there were some people saying, well, you can't pull JT because Garrett Stubbs is an inferior backup catcher. And so then I did a little bit of a dive into the numbers. Imagine that on a Monday, a little bit of numbers, all right? This year, JT Realmuto has 34 starts at catcher. Garrett Stubbs has 10. Realmuto splits 3.13 ERA. So pitchers, when he's behind the plate, have a 3.13 ERA. Garrett Stubbs, 3.95. Now, I don't know what you expected to hear. I don't know if you thought it was going to be like a 2 or a 3 or a 4-run differential between the two. Obviously, they lead the league in the majors in wins, so you would think that like it can't be that much of a disparity. But like I look at that and it's like, all right, 0.82 runs per game. You're looking at like 3 out of every 4 games Realmuto's behind the plate. Can you get by with Garrett Stubbs for a few extra games? Like, can they make it work? Can the Phillies make it work if Stubbs needs to give Realmuto a break from time to time? And I would say yes. Like, I think that there's enough there. There's enough of a sample size, at least this season, with how this pitching staff has performed, to say, yeah, you can give Realmuto a few games off here and there. The last thing that you can have happen is his body breakdown, or he comes up with like a tight hammy or something and he's out for an extended period of time. Because at that point, you've now really legitimately limited what your lineup is capable of. And while the performance behind the plate might be relatively similar, I don't know if you get to like a 60, a 70, an 80 game sample of Garrett Stubbs behind the plate if you're going to feel quite as good about the numbers. Zach Wheeler didn't have his best start. I'm kind of sugarcoating it because, as we all know, I'm a Zach Wheeler truther. I'm the guy who's been saying for years now that Zach Wheeler is the true, undisputed number one ace on the staff. And so, all right, it wasn't a great start. Stubbs was behind the plate, which I think, again, is where a lot of this kind of, not vitriol, but a lot of questioning came from the fan base of like, hey, was it fair to throw this at the feet of Garrett Stubbs? Is Stubbs the reason that Wheeler underperformed? And I'd say no, probably not. Because he's had some other really solid performances pitchers have with him behind the plate, including Christopher Sanchez in his last game. Now, Connor Allen says over on YouTube, and it's right. It's in his job title, backup catcher. What are people expecting? That to me is like where you have to have the realistic expectations. Sometimes you do the sliding scale, and sometimes it's a matter of like, a backup is a backup for a reason. Sometimes you're lucky in that your backup is just as good as your starter. It doesn't always happen, right? Certainly doesn't happen in football. Very rare that your backup quarterback is as good or better than your starting quarterback. Sometimes in hockey, with the Flyers this year, it kind of happens. Sam Ersson was as good roughly in the first half of the season as Carter Hart, redacted, was in the first half. And you said like, hey, this is kind of like a 1 and a 1A. You don't see it all the time. And I don't think it's fair in any way, shape, or form to say that Garrett Stubbs is supposed to be anywhere near the same level that JT Realmuto is. JT was signed here to be a stud behind the plate and a stud at the plate when batting. If Stubbs can provide you even like 60%, 70% of the production in both of those elements, great. I would obviously prefer more that he's calling a good game and that he's keeping this pitching staff hot. He's keeping them at the ready. He's not getting shaken off, kind of like Wheeler was doing the other day. They weren't totally in sync. But you look at it and you say like, all right, if you have realistic expectations and you're not a psycho, all right, and some of us are psychos. Some of us get a little bit more psychotic about certain teams than others. If you're being realistic about what you should expect from Garrett Stubbs, there's no reason to be upset with him. None. Now, we'll see. If Rob Thompson, a.k.a. Lyndon B. Johnson, you've never seen them together. Just remember that. Rob Thompson, Lyndon B. Johnson, never in the same photo. Coincidence? Coincidence? Craig, pull up a picture of Lyndon B. Johnson. Or find my tweet, Lyndon B. Johnson and Rob Thompson. They're virtually identical. They might have been separated at birth. I digress. If you're realistic about what you should expect from this team, you're going to have games where some of the backups are going to come in and hopefully perform well. But what Rob Thompson can't allow is for himself to fall into this trusting the player maybe a little bit more than what medicine and what history would say when as it pertains to players on the wrong side of 30 playing at catcher, catching maybe too many games. You can't lose him for an extended period of time, or things really do get kind of helter-skelter. So hopefully, if all goes well, Rob will start to kind of mix in some off days. Craig, let's pull it up. There it is. Lyndon B. Johnson, Rob Thompson. Let me know in the comments. Am I off base? I think that there's a lot there. I think if we're looking at it and we're being fair, Rob Thompson, Lyndon B. Johnson, they're not the same. There are a lot of similarities. And again, I've never seen the picture of the two of them together. All right, so let's just make sure that we're keeping it calm. There's one other thing. I'm also a truther about Spencer Turnbull. And he comes into a game yesterday, and I don't know, I feel like I'm in this weird place where Spencer Turnbull's pitched so well this year, and I do kind of feel like it is shitty that he has not been able to remain in the rotation, that he's kind of getting jerked around between the rotation and the bullpen because of the return of Taijuan Walker. And I say this every Monday, and it's mostly because he's on my fantasy team, but I would love to see Spencer Turnbull back in the rotation. I don't want an injury. I don't want there to be a reason that he has to get reinserted because of injury, but I would like to see Spencer Turnbull more. I think he's a really good pitcher. I'd like to see that if he's going to get in games, maybe you roll with him for 2 or 3 innings against the Marlins of all teams. Let it go. Like, he's got a good arm. I don't know if it's because they're trying to get him in position where he's going to do the next 2 months as a bullpen arm, and like maybe you're going to try to turn him into a guy that can be used in high leverage situations. But I would much rather see him in the rotation. I think he is a better option this year and going forward than what Taijuan Walker is. I don't care how many good or good-ish performances you get out of Taijuan Walker. I get that you sunk a lot of money into him, but that ain't my guy. Spencer Turnbull's my guy. Get him back in the rotation. Figure it out. Figure it out, Phillies. Now, there are a few other things that I wanted to get to. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts here for a second because, and I saw that there was Michael Haynes on YouTube wanted to know about the, where's it at? The ESP controversy around the report about Deshaun Jackson and the gang ties. So Deshaun Jackson and LaShawn McCoy put together a new podcast. And I guess in that podcast, they shredded Chip Kelly. Now, I'll be honest, I have not listened to the entire episode. And you know how I am with like clips and about like the lack of context and how sometimes that causes a lot of problems. I'm not going to riff on everything that was covered in it because I only saw a few of the clips that were going around social media. What I will say, based on what I saw, is it's very clear that Deshaun Jackson and LaShawn McCoy have a true disdain, like an admirable disdain for Chip Kelly. I do wonder, though, if they maybe are doing a little bit too much revisionist history. I will go back to the point that in one of the clips, they kind of intimated that if they had a different coach, or if they had a better coach, they would have been able to hoist the Lombardi trophy. I guess, like, is it fair to point out that they were both in town when Andy Reid was here? Is that fair? Was Andy Reid a better coach? Does he count? Because if he does, well, then I don't know exactly what the excuse is. And if he doesn't count, then I'm not entirely sure that we're operating under the same set of facts. Again, I am here for a petty beef. I love a petty beef as much as the next person. Like we talked last week about Drake and Kendrick Lamar. I love a good petty beef. I'm all in on them. However, you do have to kind of contend with the facts sometimes. Now, if you go back to that team, and we'll do this really quickly, the Deshaun Jackson, LaShawn McCoy, and Michael Vick trio, dynamic, next level. Remember, there was the game against the Redskins. We can call them the Redskins because that's what they were then, where they just dog walked. Probably not a great term when talking about Michael Vick. They absolutely demolished Washington. Washington's defensive players keeling over, couldn't keep up with the Chip Kelly offense. There were things there when you go back to that team that you could see a path to them being a legitimate contender. I think that the big thing that we all have to kind of come back to, though, is that team probably wasn't good enough to win, and we saw that Chip Kelly got exposed over his tenure as an Eagles coach, that you really only have the chance to take the league by storm one time. And if you don't execute that one time, chances are when coordinators catch up and legitimate head coaches with good systems catch up, they're going to be able to stamp you out and kick you out of the league. And that's exactly what happened with Chip Kelly. Deshaun Jackson had a very good career. LaShawn McCoy had a really good career. Is it a shame that they didn't get to finish here? Yes. I don't remember the entire thing about the gang ties. I don't remember the entire thing about like the report. I will just say that like there's clearly a lot of hurt on the part of Deshaun Jackson and the feeling that he was maligned and that he was, dragged through the mud, and he said that he wasn't able to look his mom in the eyes, like all of that. I think that that's the biggest shame in the whole thing from what I remember. I think that's the biggest shame is that when you get to a point where like something is impacting a guy on a personal level with their family, then I think you've gone too far. And if you don't have the receipts and if you don't have the actual proof and you tie somebody to something like a gang-related activity, I think that you've probably done some legitimate harm, not just to yourself or to your reporting, but specifically to that player or that human being. That's why, like, look, we'll just have this moment again. Pull back the curtain. There are certain things that, like, we hear at Crossing Broad with our ears, not here, as in this place. There are things that we hear about certain athletes. There are things that we hear about certain coaches, about front office executives at all these different teams. Some of it is not the best. Some of it is salacious. Not all of it gets reported. Why? Because you run the risk of doing irreparable harm, and if you can't get things double, triple, quadruple verified, you can't run with it. Now, I will say, and like we said this on Snow the Goalie, the whole redacted situation, the whole Carter Hart situation, there had been murmurs of that for 18 months before he was told to surrender himself to police in London, Ontario, okay? Like, that was a thing. And there were plenty of things going on behind the scenes. You would hear rumors about, like, hey, the league is notifying teams that, like, something could be coming. But not a lot of it's reportable because if you can't get somebody from the team or you can't get somebody from the league or both or from legal representation or from counsel for the players, you can't report it. You're running the chance and the possibility of slandering a guy who, like, may or may not be involved in some way. And if you don't do due diligence as a reporter, you're opening yourself up to libel to a case. You're opening your outlet up to a potential case. And you're running the risk of, like, ruining your own professional reputation by not doing due diligence. So I hope that kind of gives an answer to that question. I don't remember every single thing that happened with that report. I just remember the fact that, like, the perception was, oh, Deshaun Jackson is in a gang because it was reported by a reputable outlet at the time. And then over the years, it seemed to have been refuted. Somebody let me know if I have it totally wrong, but that's what I remember. So I'm going to go off of that. Now, That part's done, but let's talk about the guy who is actually going to be under center this year in Jalen Hurts. I'm listening to the radio this morning. I was listening to WIP. I heard Joe Giglio and Hugh Douglas talking about Jalen Hurts and about whether or not he's going to be able to take that next step. He's going to be able to rebound. Is he going to be back to form? Can he become that MVP type guy? Listen to a caller who showed up who said, the caller said something to the effect of like he thinks that Jalen Hurts is going to be the best quarterback in the NFC. Well, if that's the case, then presumably he'll be a top 2, top 3 MVP candidate. And I'm starting to kind of like go through the list of quarterbacks in the NFC. And do I think that there's a possibility that with Kellen Moore in town, knowing what Kellen Moore was able to do with Dak Prescott in the past, do I think that there's a chance that Kellen Moore can get similar production, similar success with Jalen Hurts? I do. I am actually, for better or worse, I'm going to be a Kellen Moore believer. And I think more than anything, I'm a Jalen Hurts believer. I do think that Jalen Hurts has it in him to go back to being maybe not a top 2 MVP candidate, but why couldn't he be a top 5 quarterback in the league? You can have the whole thing at the end of the year. Like if they have a successful bounce back season as a team and as an offense, you can absolutely have the conversation of, hey, is it because of the parts around him? Is it because he's going to have A.J. Brown again and Devontae Smith again? And now you've added Saquon Barkley. And yes, you lost Jason Kelce, but the report was that he's been around the Eagles facility. He's reportedly going to Monday Night Football for the Countdown Show. But who knows? Maybe he's thinking about it. Maybe he's rethinking. You lost your All-Pro future Hall of Fame center. That is a massive loss for this team. If there is a team that I believe has a position coach who can coach up the next guy, it's the Eagles with Stoutland. And I do think that they're going to be able to overcome that loss. But at the end of the year, if they bounce back, I would love to have a situation where you have to have the conversation of, hey, is it because Jalen Hurts got to be that top 2, top 3 MVP candidate on his own? Or is it just a mere byproduct of having so many talented guys around him with arguably the best 1-2 on the outside and one of, if not, maybe it depends on what the bounce back season looks like and it depends on what his first season with the Eagles looks like, with Saquon Barkley behind him. I would love to have that conversation because at least then it's not the one that we had at the end of this past season where it's, was there an issue in the locker room? Was it away from the field kind of things that were, dragging the Eagles down? Is that what we can blame? Was it that Jalen Hurts wasn't reading the field appropriately? Is it that they couldn't get anybody open? I would rather have a debate based on the success of the team than trying to figure out what went wrong. And I know that there are some people who have said in the past that Jalen Hurts isn't an MVP type guy. It's just because he has good players around him. I tend to lean toward, I think he was hurt last year. I think he was hurt for a significant portion of last year, and we didn't really get to see a fully healthy Jalen Hurts. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or not. I think that a big reason why you didn't see Jalen Hurts' mobility on display is because he was hurt. And I think we said it, throughout the season. I think it was around week 4, he seemed to tweak his knee again, and you saw limited mobility. He could get a first down if he needed to, but it wasn't exactly what we had become accustomed to seeing him be able to do. And when you take that element out of the offense, when you take away Jalen Hurts' mobility, he's not a bad player. And Ford says here on YouTube, he thinks that he was definitely hurt last year. Jalen Hurts is not a bad quarterback if his mobility is limited, but he's not an MVP candidate when his mobility is limited. You need that dimension to the offense. You go back to what Kellen Moore did with Dak Prescott in Dallas, and when Dak was at his most successful, he was getting Dax out of the pocket. You don't want Jalen Hurts to end up in a situation where he's immediately looking to run, where he's not reading the defense, where he's not going through his progressions. You have to find the balance. You hope that a new offensive coordinator is going to do it, and you obviously hope that Kellen Moore is a better coordinator than Brian Johnson. I would certainly hope so. I think all of you at home would hope so, unless you're one of those weird cockroach Dallas fans that live in the tri-state area and say, oh, my dad was a Dallas fan. Oh, did he grow up in Dallas? No, he grew up in Philly too. Oh, well, why is he a Dallas fan? I don't know. He liked the Star. Let's not do that. All right, that's just weird. Be better than that. Be better. Crossing Broadcast, : be better. Be like our new slogan. Some nonsense. All right, let's get into your team, your town, your Philadelphia 76ers for a second, because they're now, oh, look at this. We got a little Johnny Marks comment. Let's go to Johnny Marks. Hertz may have been injured, but he had no confidence in the pocket. He was sensing pressure that wasn't there, and once they started blitzing, it was over. I think a lot of it is just when you're hurt, when you're actively injured and you're trying to play through injury, yeah, there might be some truth to the idea that like you're off your timing, you're off your rhythm, and maybe because you feel the need to self-preserve and you feel the need to actively avoid getting hurt, doing what it is that you typically are best at doing, which in his case is getting out of the pocket and making a decision whether to run or to pass outside of the pocket. If you start to overthink that, or if you're not going through your typical muscle memory, I do think that like it does limit your ability and it limits your upside as a player. So he probably, I would say that like a bigger part of his lack of confidence, if that's what we're going to go with, if that's the notion we're going to, run with, if it's a lack of confidence, I don't think it's a lack of confidence in his guys to get open. I don't think it's a lack of confidence in A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. I don't think it was a lack of confidence in DeAndre Swift or in that offensive line. I think it was maybe an internal lack of confidence because he knew that he physically couldn't do what he has always been so good at doing. We'll see next year. We will see, hopefully, after a healthy offseason, whether or not he'll be able to get himself back to what I would like to see is like top 5 MVP consideration. Like, let's get to week 10. And Jalen Hurts is like top 5 in odds at DraftKings or FanDuel, which you can find over on crossingbroad.com, including, I'll tell you really quickly, and I probably have to do like the responsible gambling disclaimer at the bottom, right? But, Fanatics Sportsbook, available, crossingbroad.com. I actually wrote about it this morning. You can go over there and you can read about it over on crossingbroad.com. $50 sign-up bonus if you're in the great state of Pennsylvania. If you're in PA or New Jersey, you can get 250 free spins for cash eruption in the FanDuel Casino, plus that $50 sign-up bonus from Fanatics Sportsbook. So there you go, friends. Craig, don't pull that one up. Don't do it. Pull up the story itself, because then we can show the little disclaimer. Because I'm pretty sure anytime you talk about something with the sportsbooks, you're supposed to show the disclaimer. It's like on the right side with the offers. The right side, Craig. The right side. There you go. It'll pop up there. But I was actually kind of screwing around with the Fanatics app this morning. But now we can pull that up, Craig. There you go, because the disclaimer's on the screen there. So there we go. Now we'll be okay. We'll be legally fine. But there you go. If you're not in PA or New Jersey or New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, or Vermont, but you're in a state with Fanatics Sportsbook, you can actually get up to $1,000 in bonus bets. They're running staggered offers. Listen, don't ask me why, okay? I just deal with the fact that they say that's what we're doing. I go, all right, sounds good to me. But Fanatics Sportsbook, go over crossingbroad.com. You can read all about it. I walk you through the whole process. I walk you through how the offers work because I'm a nice guy, and that's what I'm here for. Now let's get to something and to somebody that I work with legal online sports betting here at XL Media. From Elite Sports New York, the great Danny Small is here. Danny, how are you?
Good. How's it going, Russ? You like the energy you're bringing, dropping a little Fanatics promo in there. Love it.
That's what we do. That's
that
what
coffee.
We do.
An Ina Garden reference. Like
an Ina Garden? Store-bought is fine. We're here for it. Danny, yep. I'm glad that I have a New Yorker here, somebody who believes in the Knicks, somebody who has probably purchased a Jalen Brunson jersey, a Josh Hart jersey, may have the Julius Randle one in the closet getting a little bit of dust on it. Is there an Amari Stoudemire jersey in the closet?
No, I can do you one better. I have a Michael Beasley Knicks jersey. He's like one of my it's so random, I know, but he's like one of my favorite players always. I mean, he's just like the way he played at Kansas State. He was on the Knicks for a year when I covered him. So like at that time, like, I'm covering the team. I wasn't as like into it as a fan, but then they let him go and his jersey was like $15 on the NBA store. And I'm like, how can I not? So
how could you not?
That's the jersey I break out when it's a desperate need for a win.
So let's talk about the fact that New York is ready to burn itself to the ground. After taking a 2-0 series lead and looking like Tyrese Halliburton was legitimately hurt, and Rick Carlisle said after Game 2, everybody knows that Halliburton's back is hurt. It sure felt, they did a lot of complaining, and they sent like 49 plays from the first 2 games to the league office that they felt were officiated incorrectly. The Pacers have stormed back, and it wasn't like they squeaked out a win against your New York Knicks last night. They had stretches of that game where they delivered what I would say is effectively a curb stomp, and I would say that a 121-89 final score would indicate a little bit more than a curb stomp. What are the emotions like right now up in New York around the Knicks? Does everybody feel like they're going to bounce back? Are people ready to jump off the bridge? Are people getting the pitchforks and flames ready to storm WFAN's studio? Like, where are the Knicks fans at right now?
I think more than not. I mean, there's people who want to, and you could see my tweet there. That's kind of how I feel. That's
why Craig makes $450,000. He has your tweets at the ready.
You got to, I think you got to definitely like burn that film and just move on. I mean, it's as bad of a playoff loss as I've seen, like maybe any team take in a long time. I mean, whatever it was, 39, 40 points they lost by. But they clearly looked gassed. They got a little bit of time to rest. So you can't, look at a positive from a 39-point loss or whatever it was. But if you're trying to take something out of it, that's it. There's definitely people who want to burn it down and, Tibbs sucks, Tibbs ruined the season, blah, 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 blah. But I think there's more goodwill from Knicks fans and more belief just because this team has overcome so much already to this point. But the one problem is that this isn't the house money series. This isn't the if we lose, we made it this far. It is what, that's not this series. If they make it to Boston, then that's, you can say all right, they basically accomplished as much as you can expect them to, and you can live with that. This one, I was a big Pacers hater coming into this series, but they played really well the last two games. The defense has for sure gone up. Joe Pipple, you're right. Only playing 6 guys is wearing them down. But the counterpoint to that is just do we want to see Shake Milton? Do we want to see Daquan Jeffries? They just don't have many guys. Jericho Sims is literally he's playing 10 minutes a game and he's giving you nothing. So Tibbs is in a tough spot. And I think with Tibbs too, we can relitigate what happened in Chicago or Minnesota. But this year it's been the high minutes are a result of injuries, not the other way around. Julius Randle gets taken down, hurts his shoulder, separates it, done for the year. That's not on Tibbs for the minutes. OG Anunoby is the one you can kind of say a hamstring, maybe who's playing him too much. That's one I can give you that. But OG also didn't play a ton during the regular season, so his workload already wasn't crazy. And, hamstring's tough. I mean, it is what it is.
They're under 500 without him in the lineup and over 500 significantly with him in it.
I forget the exact number, but it's 25
I can't wait to watch the Knicks max him out. That's going to be great this offseason.
Yeah, that's the injury.
What better way to spend your cap? The reason though that I brought you on, and I see that longtime listener and viewer of the show, Ford, is having himself a moment in the comments about why are we talking about the Knicks on a Philly show? It's simple. Well, there's actually two. One is for something I want to discuss with you, and one is as a transitional thing to end the show. First, you still have significant interest in this series in Philadelphia for two reasons. One, it's the team that knocked out the Sixers. Two, 3 of the guys who are instrumental or have been largely instrumental in the success of the Knicks this season played for Villanova. And so a lot of Nova fans are still monitoring what's happening. So Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo all played here. They, to varying degrees, were responsible for the downfall of the Sixers in the first round. The thing that I come back to, and this is actually the thing, Danny, is Tibbs has this propensity for overplaying guys, potentially burning them out. So if you're a Jalen Brunson fan, if you were a Nova fan who now doesn't want to actively root for the Knicks but is happy to see their guy, Jalen Brunson, doing well, are you concerned as a Knicks fan that what happened to other stars in the past, maybe like a Jimmy Butler playing for Tibbs in the past, is there a concern that he's going to run Brunson into the ground and what appears to be this beautiful, shiny object, this toy, this thing that all the Knicks fans are going to be able to rally around? Is there a concern that 2 or 3 years of this with Tibbs, you're only going to get a 2 or 3 year run with Jalen Brunson before he physically breaks down? Is there a concern?
100%. I mean, I'm a Tibbs supporter. I believe in him, but you can't discount what has happened. I think this year there's definitely circumstances that have forced them into playing this hand because Brunson was playing about 36, 37 minutes a game before all the injuries and all that. But yeah, 2-3 years down the line, you got to worry about that. Like you said, OG, if they max him out or sign him, he's got injury issues. So it's not a perfect world in New York for the Knicks right now. But I like where they're at compared to some of the other teams in the East, including Philly, even though I'm not completely down on them with all the cap space they got coming this year and kind of all the different things they can do to retool around Embiid and Maxey.
So the other part of this, the other Sixers part of this is, I mentioned Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is on that very much so on the wrong side of 30, and his miles that he has on his legs are, I would say, even more amplified by the way that Tibbs used him. And when you look at a guy who physically looks like he can't remain healthy and does break down, I would tie a lot of that back to his time playing for Tibbs in Chicago. And so I guess that there has to be some level of concern. Like if you're a Knicks fan, it's a big concern. I guess I'm glad to some extent that Tibbs can't coach in Philly because Nick Nurse likes to ride his stars a lot. But like Joel Embiid would be dead by game 30 if Tibbs were in control. I want to go to this with you though, Danny. You're a Knicks guy. Were you a Rangers guy? And if so, were you a John Tortorella guy?
I mean, I'm not a huge hockey guy, but I do remember Torts, like his era here in New York, obviously, because I mean that's just the way he is. He's gonna be a story. He's gonna make himself the story a lot. I don't know. I'm technically an Islanders guy, but I'm not like a diehard hockey guy. Yeah, I know. But yeah, I'm not a diehard hockey guy. But I don't know. Torts, he's always seemed like an asshole to me. Like I don't know. He seems similar to Tibbs in that way, where like he'll get guys that like want to play for him and they'll go to bat for him and they'll be all in. But he's another guy. It seems like he runs his course after a while, and it's just time to move on. I don't know how that is in Philly with you guys now, but that's 100% what happened with the Rangers. He just overstayed his welcome.
Well, and that's the thing is like I look at what Tibbs does in the NBA and what Torts does in the NHL, and to me they're very similar. You ride the same guys, you actively, to some extent, can run them into the ground, and then what you're left with is like once they leave a city, they've left fire and brimstone in their wake. Like they've torched the ground. There's no way to replant the soil. You can't plant seeds in burnt, crispy soil or in ash, right? So Tibbs, to me, if I were a Knicks fan, I guess I'd be a little bit concerned because it's not like you have guys that are at the end of their career. Like these are guys that in theory could be poised to make a run. My last thing for you before you leave, Julius Randle, will he be in New York next year? Are they going to move off? Is LeBron James going to end up in New York?
No,
Philly fans need to know.
No, I don't think.
What's
LeBron
the scuttlebutt?
Yeah, I don't think LeBron James is ending up here. And I don't. I mean, if this series ends and the Knicks lose, like I wouldn't be completely shocked if they go finally make that big move and that big splash to make a change. And if that happens, Randall might be the guy it takes to move. But I do have to think that they're going to run it back with this roster plus Randall, and maybe retool a little bit on the fringes there. But I have to imagine they're going to give Randall a shot. I mean, he's 2-time All-NBA, 3-time All-Star. He drives Knicks fans crazy. Like me too. I get frustrated with what he does sometimes out there. But at the end of the day, he is like a dominant offensive player when he's going, and teams tilt their defenses so much to him. Like that's the easiest way you can say, people who hate on Randall. It's like, just look at how other teams treat him and how other coaches coach against him. Like he's clearly a very good player.
So it's one of those things where maybe the fans kind of underrate him versus what the rest of the league sees.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot, and even I fell into that trap a little bit of like when he was out, it's like, well, the Knicks, they might actually be better without him because the offense is, more free flowing, blah, blah. But I think like a game like yesterday, you see, when that onslaught is coming and no one can hit a bucket, Randall would a lot of times be that guy who like, all right, everybody else sucks, but then he hits a couple threes, he drives, gets to the lane. Like he was a guy that could kind of keep you alive in there.
Is Julius Randle Tobias Harris? 610-632.
No.
Yeah. Danny, thanks for hopping on.
Not yet.
Thanks for hopping on the show. Best of luck with the rest of your day.
Yep.
I know exactly what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, I know.
This is the beauty. Anyway, thanks, Danny. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, so the last thing, because like I was about to finish this up with the Flyers point, so we'll go there. But the Eagles just released their opponents, so we're gonna have that chat to end on an upswing here at the end of the show. Really quick, because we were talking about the Flyers there in Torts. There have been a lot of questions and a lot of rumors and a lot of scuttlebutt, I'll use the word again, that the Flyers might be trying to get Matvei Michkov over here sooner than expected. And the reports have been like kind of iffy. I think it was 32 Thoughts. I think it was Elliot Friedman put a thing out over the weekend that there has been conversations happening. NHL teams and KHL teams can't negotiate buyouts anymore. That was taken out of the CBA a few years ago. So like every once in a while, you'll see somebody who says, oh, the Flyers bought out Ivan Fedotov's contract to get him over here. Or like, oh, they bought out Kolosov's contract to come over. Why couldn't they just do that with Michkov? Because in the past, they've been able to do that. They've been able to buy out, in theory. You can pay a KHL team, get him out of his deal. The KHL team benefits. They have cash on hand. And as a team, you just get to bring the guy over. Sean C. says it was Frank Saravalli. Thank you, Sean, who mentioned the third-party negotiations. So while the teams can't actively negotiate together, what can be done is an agent can have a conversation with both organizations and try to find some kind of common ground to perhaps help get a player out of their deal. Listen, I think if we're all kind of reading the tea leaves to some extent, Fedotov getting out the way that he did, where it seemed like that was dead to rights, and then boom, they invalidate the last year of his contract in the KHL. Did that maybe set the stage? Did that maybe improve relations with the KHL? Could it potentially lead to Michkov coming over sooner? I still wouldn't put my money on it. I don't see a scenario where in 2024, 25, you get Matvei Michkov over here. I think that all along the hope had been that like 2026 would be the year. Maybe they can figure out a way to work something out through a third party. Maybe they can figure out a way to get him here, not this upcoming season, but next year, the 25-26 season. And maybe they can get that last year of his KHL deal wiped away and get him over here a year sooner. My big contention and my only issue, I would love to see Matvei Michkov over here, right? He is by far their best prospect as a team, without a doubt. Gauthier was their best stateside prospect. He's gone. The guy that you have to tie a lot of your hopes to in terms of the rebuild and what you're hoping to be able to do in the future and like actually create long sustained success rides significantly on Matvei Michkov. And so like I would love to see him here soon, but I do have a problem. Like I do have a concern. I don't particularly want to see John Tortorella coaching Matvei Michkov. I don't. I'm not here for it. And I'm going to tell you why. And you know, sometimes I say things that have to do with the Flyers, and then like every once in a while I used to hear a lot of feedback from the Flyers when the prior regime was here. They got very upset with the things I said. This current regime, they're just kind of like, say what you got to say. I'll say it very clearly. I don't think that John Tortorella is the best coach for Matvei Michkov. If you're a believer in the reports around the draft that Michkov was like a malcontent or a coach killer, then yeah, maybe Torts is a good coach for him because maybe like Torts will just like coach the hell out of him and maybe the no-nonsense approach will work. Maybe it will. But I would like to believe that Matvei Michkov isn't that guy. I'd like to believe the veterans who were quoted around the draft and after the draft who said, no, he's a good kid. He just doesn't like to lose. And sometimes that rubs people, especially veteran players, the wrong way because they feel like, you know, the way that you're supposed to kind of like cut your teeth in the league, they might have gotten rubbed the wrong way, but he doesn't like to lose. So he's very focused and he's very intense, maybe more intense than you're used to seeing out of an 18 or 19-year-old player. I have no interest in watching John Tortorella coach that guy because they're going to be like stupid mind games. Torts is going to do the thing that Torts always does. The playbook is out there. It's been out there for decades, all right? Torts hasn't won jack shit in 2 decades. This is why I've compared him to Doc Rivers so many times. You can have stacked teams like he did in Tampa. You can always have a really good goalie like he did with the Rangers, with Lundqvist. Like you can pick up a lot of wins that way. Vigneault, by the way, also benefited from that in his career. I'm not saying Torts is a bad coach. Torts got a lot out of this team last year. He got far more out of a bad roster than any coach should have. But he's not the one that you like try to actively build with and then flip the switch to win with. I don't see it. Okay? Like I don't see it. Scott Ball says over on YouTube, Torts builds, someone else comes in a year or two to win. Here's the thing. Do you want him laying that foundation? Because I could make the case to you right now that the building that Torts did and the culture that Torts did, he pissed all over when he sat Sean Couturier, when he scratched Sean Couturier, which was not necessary. And like, I don't want to relitigate the whole thing, but it didn't go over well in that locker room. And since the season has ended, there have been a lot of murmurs behind the scenes. Again, start the show. Not reportable. You don't have a lot of guys who want to go on the record with their honest thoughts about how the season unfolded with Torts and especially how the benching went. So like, not reportable. Certainly can mention the fact that there are many people in that locker room who are not happy with the head coach and may or may not be questioning, why the fuck are we bringing this guy back? Why? For what reason? What was accomplished? You didn't make the playoffs. You pushed these guys until their breaking point, and in a lot of cases, maybe crushed some of their confidence en route to trying to make a playoff that you really shouldn't have been trying to make in the first place if you're trying to rebuild. And then you fucking missed them anyway. You still didn't make the playoffs. And then you ended up with a pick that's like in the middle of the first round, which is not great for a rebuild, which is where the Flyers typically are anyway. See, I got myself all worked up. I don't want Torts coaching Matvei Michkov. No interest. Zero. Like, no, absolutely not. Because the last thing you can have is for one of your top prospects to also not want to play for John Tortorella, allegedly. We'll say the allegedly with Quitter Gauthier. Though I think that it's kind of clear. There's at least a little bit of that. Maybe it was the not guaranteeing him a roster spot like the Ducks ended up doing where they burned a year of his ELC by playing him. But like, Michkov might, I don't know. If Michkov says, oh yeah, I want to play for Torts, fine, fuck it, whatever. Fine. But like the head games, the benching guys in their hometowns, like he's done with Bobby Brink and like he did with Travis Sanheim, the pulling a guy out of the lineup when there are other players playing significantly worse, like he did time and time again with Morgan Frost, all those old tricks, like he's played them. He's actually played them multiple seasons in a row. They fall on deaf ears. With where the murmurs of the locker room sentiment on Torts are right now, you can't do that again next year. You can't. Like, what exactly is the emergency lever that you're going to pull? He tried to scratch the captain to galvanize the team against the head coach. It didn't work. They puked all over themselves and they knocked themselves out of the playoffs. You can't do that next year. That's not available. Benching guys in front of their friends and families in their hometowns and saying, "I don't know that that's where they played." Bullshit. Like, very much bullshit. You can't pull, like, you could do that, but that's just a dickhead thing to do. There's no active reason that you should bench a guy in front of his hometown, in front of his friends and family, especially if there are other guys in the lineup that are playing as bad or worse. So, like, where exactly do you go from there? I don't think that this coach and this player should ever cross paths in the coaching player paths. They shouldn't be anywhere near each other. If this organization believes so much in the culture that John Tortorella has put into place is really going to be the thing that's going to propel them into a decade of success, send them upstairs. Send them up with Jonesy and Danny Briere. Bring in one of the other coaches that's available. If the Hurricanes get knocked out of the playoffs, do you have the chat about Rod Brind'Amour? It would appear as though that's not really on the table. They kind of got shamed into like a public back and forth about like whether or not the team had made an offer and whether or not Brind'Amour was being serious in like his consideration. But there are going to be people that are going to clamor for Rod Brind'Amour. Craig Berube is out there and has won a cup. And like not 2 decades ago. There are going to be other coaches that are going to be available. I would even make the case that if Torts wanted to move upstairs to let Brad Shaw be the head coach after the success he's had with like, honestly, not a very good blue line, he's done a great job. I wouldn't even have a problem with Brad Shaw being elevated to the head coach position for a couple of years. You can do your actual analysis of like, hey, can we build with this guy? Can he maintain the culture? And can he be the guy to lead us into success? I don't care. Like, I'm not going to come on here and say, oh yeah, Craig Berube's the guy to go with. I don't know, man. Like, Craig Berube didn't exactly like blow anybody's doors off when he was the head coach here. He went off and had like an anomaly of a team that was like in last place in December, turned it around, won the Stanley Cup. That will forever be the anomaly. They didn't have the same sustained success for 5 years after that, right? That he's out of a job. Is it his fault? Is it the veterans there? Like, one of the guys who used to play here got paid significant money and then went there and underperformed and looked largely lazy and disengaged. Like, I don't know. I didn't watch every Blues game, okay? But like, I don't want this coach with this player. I really don't. I don't think it's great. I think the likelihood of him fucking that up is so high. I think the likelihood of him potentially turning off the best prospect that this team has had in probably a decade is significantly high, unless this guy is wired in a way that like he needs to be kicked in the teeth every day at practice, that he needs to have his hair lit on fire. But in fairness, if that's the kind of guy he comes in and is going to be, it won't work. It just won't work at all, which is where I come back to what the veteran player said after the draft. He's an intense guy. He doesn't like to lose. I like that. And I think if this Flyers team were good enough to make a cup run and add him to the mix, I would say, sure, let Torts be his coach. But if this is going to continue to be a 1 or 2 more years, we're supposed to try to like rebuild, not maybe tear it down to the studs, but like get high draft picks. Michkov is going to be a good player. He might not blow your doors off. He might not be like a 30-goal scorer in his first year, but like stands to reason he's going to be better than some of like the third-line guys you had on the team this year. And if he's going to raise your floor to a point where like your team is going to work its way out of top 10 pick, top 5 pick, then it doesn't make any sense to bring him over. So I get why people are excited. I get why people want to see Michkov here. I would like it too, but not with this guy as head coach. Absolutely not. Do not want it. And it will ultimately irreparably damage this organization's goal to try to make a winning team for an extended period of time and be a legitimate cup contender and not just a one-off fluke. Done there. Let's talk about the Eagles. We'll bring it back to the Eagles and then we'll head out. We'll go do our thing for the rest of the day. Craig, can you bring up the tweet that you sent over behind the scenes? The Eagles' opponents have been announced. And here you go. Those of you who are watching live on YouTube, on Instagram Live, Facebook, and Twitter, you can see it. Those of you listening in the podcast feed, by the time you listen to the show, you've probably already seen the graphic, but just in case you haven't, they've got their home games against the NFC East. They'll also host the Browns, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Jags, the Packers, and the Steelers. So you get the cross-state rivalry. You get some of the teams from the South. The one concern, I guess, if you're a Falcons fan, is who's going to be your quarterback at that point. Will it be Kirk Cousins? Will it be Penix? Who knows? Who knows? I wouldn't say that that's murderer's row. That should be, let's see. How many wins do we think we can get from the home schedule? Keep in mind that the Packers game is on a Friday to start the season in Brazil. So that game is maybe more of a toss-up than you wanted it to be. Should be able to beat the Steelers. Should be able to beat Doug Peterson's middle part and visor at home. Carolina's horrendous. Atlanta might be a pretty good test. Cleveland could be a tough game. And then you have whatever you think of the NFC East. You look at the away schedule, though, and that's where you have some doozies. At Tampa, probably winnable. At the Rams, your guess is as good as mine, but that's not going to be an easy game. At Baltimore, that's bad, very bad. That's going to be one of those games that you hope maybe is a Christmas Day game or is maybe a late season game where, like, you get a real feel for these teams could meet in the Super Bowl and, like, see how you stack up. Like, if Jalen Hurts is back to having his MVP-ish form and then he goes up against the MVP, Lamar Jackson, you'll get a real feel for how close this Eagles team is to being a Super Bowl contender, because presumably, barring health, they and the Ravens should be at or near the top of their respective conferences. Then you have the Bengals, and I still don't know what to make of the Bengals. I think the Bengals are going to be a good team again. I'm not the biggest Joe Burrow guy. I'm not the biggest believer that the Bengals are going to have like some massively successful season. They probably will end up in the top 3 in the AFC, top 4. They don't really scare me. We'll see how things land. We'll see how they look in the start of the season, but I think it's going to be hard. And then the Saints, I don't know. Saints game, probably a win. So Craigles, if we go through this, you have to keep the math, Craig, because I can't do it. It's too hard for me, okay? Craig's got the hands up behind the glass. All right, here we go. Home against Dallas, loss. Home against Giants, win. Home against Washington, win. Home against Cleveland, win. Home against Atlanta, win. Home against Carolina, absolutely win. Home against Jacksonville, win. I'm going to change the Browns game. I want the Browns to be a loss. Loss against the Packers to start the year. I think that game's going to be a shit show. I honestly have no idea how it's going to go, but I don't feel comfortable saying win. And then win against the Steelers with Russell Wilson. So what did that end up being? I said loss to Cleveland, loss to the Packers. So it's 2, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 7-2. Dallas, I think I said was going to be a loss. So 3. 6-3 at home. That's not great if you're trying to win the conference. Away, they'll win at Dallas. I always lie to myself every year and say they're going to beat Dallas in Dallas. Beat the Giants. Beat the Commanders. They're not going to go 3-0 on the road. I'm an idiot. Lose to the Bucks. Beat the Rams. Lose to the Ravens. Beat the Bengals. And then beat the Saints. So 6-2. 6-2. And what was it before? 6-3, I think is what I said. So 12-5. Correct? 12-5 this year. That gets you probably the top of the NFC East. Probably has you with a top-ish spot in the conference. I hope they do better than 12-5. I think they probably have the talent to. What's my biggest holdup? What's the biggest thing that I have to hold against the team? I still don't think they have a linebacking core. I don't. I still think that's going to be an issue. I think that they have fortified the secondary specifically by bringing back CJ GJ. I think it's going to be like the pickup of the offseason, at least on the defensive side of the ball. I think that might be the most impactful defensive signing in the entire league because of what he's going to be able to do in the secondary to solidify things and take a little bit of pressure off of some of the guys you just drafted. If Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell, if even one of them turns out to be like first round talent and like immediately translate to the game, then I might say like, hey, 12 wins is light. They're closer to 13 or 14. If both of those guys play like a first round talent and plug and play, and Vic Fangio is able to maximize those guys to the best of their abilities and like still keeping in mind that they're going to be rookies, like you could very well talk yourself into a 13-14 win season. You could. I still am very hesitant because there's so much youth in the secondary and because I still don't think they've addressed the linebacking core. And I'll also go back to something I said in the beginning of the show. I believe that Jeff Stoutland is able to develop guys on the offensive line. They took a total unknown in Jordan Mailata and turned him into an absolute stud at tackle. I do think that, like, if Jason Kelce gets the itch and he comes back, then, like, I think 13-14 wins is, like, legitimate and it can happen. If they don't have Kelce, if he stays retired, and you have to go to a younger guy to take that spot, we're going to have a conversation about whether or not they can develop the next Kelce. And if not, that could end up taking what appears to be something that could be like the greatest show on turf, but in Philadelphia. You're going to be in a situation where, like, if center becomes a question mark, it could blow the whole season up. I mean, that could take you from being what I think is a 12-win team or a 13-win team, and it could make you a 7-win team if the offensive line has an injury. Like Lane Johnson, we've seen every year. If Lane Johnson's hurt for an extended period of time, they're screwed. They have not been able to develop the guy to take over for him. Assuming health, they should be like a 12, 13-win team. Let me know in the comments below. You can tweet at me at Joy on Broad. You can tweet at Crossing Broad with your thoughts. If you're watching on YouTube, seriously, please leave your comment below. It could be in the live chat. It could be after the fact. Let me know what you think the Eagles' record would be, and let me know the breakdown. Like, go by wins and losses. Break it down by home and away. Give me your thoughts. I'm actually interested to know where everybody is sitting at. I see Ford is saying that he thinks they're going to have 11 wins. Scott Ball said that he thinks loss to the Bucks, Rams, Ravens, and Saints. So we'll see. Like I'm a little bit bullish on the Eagles this year, but I'm trying to remain at least somewhat realistic that, like, my picks, of having like the Eagles win at Dallas, lose at home, that might be wrong. Or saying that they're going to beat the Giants both times might be wrong. But I do think that like when it all shakes out, you're probably looking at a 12-win team, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we'll see. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Big thank you to everybody who checked out the show live on YouTube, on Instagram Live, on Facebook, on Twitter. Big thank you to everybody who watches after the fact on all of those platforms, especially on YouTube. Make sure if you haven't done so already, you like the video, share the video, subscribe, ring the little bell so you get notified anytime a video goes up, a show like this or like Crossed Up earlier this morning goes live. You can get a little notification on your phone or your device. And if you haven't done so already, go subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora. If there's another app that you prefer, Crossing Broadcast is available there as well. So a big thank you to everybody who tuned in. Big thank you to everybody who watches and listens after the fact. A big thank you to Craig on the other side of the glass. Kevin Kincaid will be back on Thursday in the lead chair with Crossing Broadcast on Thursday. Until then, big thank you to everybody who checked out the show. Appreciate you all. I'll talk to you soon. Let's chat on Twitter @JoyOnBroad. Thanks again, everybody. Hope to talk to you again next month.